Right from the start of MLP, we see that Applejack is an upright, hard-working, and dependable pony. She continues a tradition of working sweet apple acres that has spanned generations of her family. She has a welcoming personality, a no-nonsense attitude, and holds her family in very high regard. She also shows great wisdom and understanding, and she is often the voice of reason. She is also willing to admit when she is wrong, even when she has fought so hard to be right. But Applejack does have her weaknesses. As I mentioned in my first video, Applejack can be stubborn and prideful. These weaknesses don't manifest themselves often, but when they do, it can cause a lot of frustration in others. But why does Applejack have this stubbornness to her? Why does her pride mean so much to her? When you look at her brother Big Macintosh, you see a bit of a different personality. We don't know much about Big Mac, and I really would like to see an episode that explores more of his character. But from what little we have seen, though, he is more of a strong silent type, with a bit of a shy streak to him. Considering that both Applejack and Big Mac grew up in similar circumstances, why does Applejack have this stubborn streak that Big Mac seems to lack? Could it be that they just have different personalities? Perhaps. But I would like to present a different theory as to why Applejack feels so strongly about doing things on her own. From early on in the series, we see that Applejack shares a very close relationship with her sister Applebloom. We often see them working together, playing together, and confiding in each other. It's really nice to see a devoted family bond in a cartoon show, particularly one that also feels so natural. And even though there are other family relationships in MLP, you don't see as close of a bond between any other pair of siblings in the show. Why do these two share such a close relationship? You don't see Applebloom confiding in Big Mac or Granny Smith nearly as much as Applejack. Applebloom looks up to her sister in so many ways. Could it be that Applejack and Applebloom just naturally get along so well? Again, perhaps. But there is some evidence to suggest that there is more here than meets the eye. So let's take a look back into Applejack's past and examine some clues. In the Cutie Mark Chronicles, we see Applejack as a young filly. And during this flashback, we see that she wants to take her life in a new direction by leaving Sweet Apple Acres and living with her uncle and Aunt Orange in Manhattan. But as she is leaving the farm, we notice something that seems a little odd. Both Granny Smith and Big Mac are there to see Applejack off, but where are her parents? We have never seen Applejack's parents throughout the show, and it was speculated by some fans for a long while that Applejack's parents had already passed on. And then during Apple Family Reunion, we see a quick moment where Applejack is looking up at the sky and two shooting stars come into view. A tweet from Sabrina, or Sibsy, after the episode confirms that this was a nod to the fans to show that Applejack's parents are indeed out of the picture. So it stands to reason that if Applejack's parents were not there to see her off when she is starting a new life in Manhattan, then they were already out of the picture even when Applejack was at that young age. I admit that I am speculating here, even with the evidence that seems to back it up. But when I think about Applejack and compare it to this theory about her past, I start to get a clearer picture of just how she became the pony she is today. Applejack talks about how much she misses Big Mac and Granny Smith and how she's feeling quite homesick. And then she sees the rainbow that points the way back home and believes it to be a sign. But even more than that, what if part of the reason she ended up leaving Manhattan was because she realized how much her family needed her? And if Applejack's parents were already out of the picture, then she would be returning home to Big Mac, Granny Smith, and a very young Apple Bloom. I can only imagine what it would have been like for their family at that time. It shows great strength of character to know that Applejack had to go through the tragedy of losing her parents at such a young age and yet still found the will to keep going. She dedicates her life to the farm and her family. She works the apple orchard, maintains the buildings, and tends to the livestock. All the while, though, she is also caring for her younger sister. What must it have been like for Applejack, having to do so much to take care of the farm while helping to raise her sister? Thankfully, she did have help. Big Mac is often seen doing farm work, although you don't often see him doing much with Applebloom. Granny Smith also does her part around the home and even spends some time with her granddaughter. But given her age, it's easy to see that she could only have done so much in raising Applebloom. And given the fact that Applebloom has such a close relationship with Applejack, it stands to reason that Applejack was and still is the one doing the most in raising her sister. Applejack is the closest thing to a mother that Applebloom has. And even though it was the tragedy of losing their parents at such a young age that caused this situation to happen, the fact that Applejack as a young filly decided to dedicate her life to the farm and her family speaks volumes about her character. Applejack's greatest strengths are her honesty, integrity, and dependability. And I believe that these strengths were made as powerful as they are in part because of this past tragedy and her decision to do her utmost to make the best of it. She became a responsible, mature, and upright pony. But this may also help explain why she can be stubborn and prideful. I can start to see why Applejack has this tendency to strive so hard in keeping the promises that she makes. Having decided at a young age to do everything she can to help the farm and her family can't have been easy. It takes a strong will to bear such responsibility so early in life. And a strong will can sometimes lead to stubbornness and pride. And that will is made even stronger when Applejack realizes that if she doesn't do so much, then no one else will. I'm sure that both Big Mac and Granny Smith would have done their utmost to keep things going even if Applejack had decided to stay at Manhattan. But can you imagine what would have happened to the farm if Applejack had never come back? Can you imagine what kind of pony Applejack would have become if she hadn't wanted to take those responsibilities? I believe that Applejack is an inspiring example today in part because she took a tragic loss and decided to make the most of herself anyway. And she also became an inspiring example to Applebloom because Applejack took so much part in raising her. And the Apple family bond became even stronger because of Applejack's example. I respected Applejack's character when I first started watching the show, but that respect continues to grow the more I see her overcome her personal struggles. She may keep some of that stubbornness and pride for the rest of her life, but understanding where that comes from gives me a greater appreciation for her character. I also like the fact that despite Applejack having a tragic backstory, she doesn't have 1 ounce of bitterness to her personality today. We can see that she has moments of being sad, but she doesn't allow that sadness to take over any part of her life. It is my hope that you will think of a tragedy that happened in your life or the lives of others that you know. Think about how you or others changed because of that tragedy. Do you know a person that became better by accepting responsibility and making the most of it despite a tragedy? Applejack shows us that this is possible to do. Do we have the strength to do what she did? Turn and face our problems instead of leaving them behind? Even Applejack wasn't impervious to her tragedy. She did try to start a new life in Manhattan. But it was wonderful to see her take responsibility to help those who needed her most. I would like to hear your thoughts on Applejack and how a great strength can come from a tragedy. And I hope that many fans of Applejack gain an even greater appreciation for her character, just as I did. I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.